And welcome into another episode of Tiger Territory, part of the Foul Territory Network, a Detroit Tigers podcast. I'm Kieran Steckley. With me, as always, is a man who knows how to make his mark in the market. He is Cody Stavenhagen. How you doing?
Doing good, Kieran. Kind of glad I don't have to worry about markets for a living, or I guess I do. I just follow them, not actually play them. Um, because the baseball market, I've said it before, it's really not very fun, right? We have no signing deadline. We have things that just drag on. We will return just briefly to the latest episode of How Alex Bregman's World Turns, and in the past few days, we really have learned nothing other than there's no movement toward a deal with the Tigers. You can believe whatever you want from reporting out there. This has been pretty quiet for a while. I do wonder if it's time for Tigers fans to start preparing for a scenario in which Alex Bregman is not a Detroit Tiger. The Boston Red Sox could still make a lot of sense. There's been some whispers that if he does end up taking a shorter term deal, the New York Mets could jump in on this. Like, if he's not a Tiger already, I just have a hard time seeing what it is that's going to change, that would suddenly allow the Tigers to win out.
Yeah, I mean, the reality of the situation is that as much as the ratio of talking about Bregman to traction for Detroit is way off.
Way
It's just
off, and
way
even
off.
some of the
We are
reported
guilty.
traction earlier was far overstated, in my opinion.
Yeah, so like we're doing it because I think we have a responsibility to address some of this stuff. But uh, even if I was like a Boston Red Sox fan, if we were doing a Red Sox podcast, I think I'd kind of feel similarly frustrated with the lack of movement here, and especially if you believe like you just have like the best remaining offer. I mean, John Heyman was like, maybe Houston's not out of it yet, which would probably be the funniest result of
That'd be hilarious. I don't
of
know where Paredes would like play on that team, but I don't know, man. Yeah, I don't know.
so yeah, like that market's not moving all that much. But I did kind of think like whenever there's like one of these pseudo updates about Bregman, one of the things that comes to mind is like I wonder if we were just having a couple beers with AJ, like what his honest assessment would be about like bringing in Alex at this age with with his resume, both the things that you like, the things that you project may not do that well on a long term deal. Like I'm just kind of curious what he would say to all that, because again, he's a front office guy too. Like he has that training, so he understands it all. I'm just curious. That's not really a question. I'm just curious what AJ would think about this, and especially considering if they are at a hard line or some other version of that word. Like him and Scott have always kind of been lockstep, at least publicly. So like I imagine his true feelings are felt or are known to Scott Harris. So like I said, I'd just be curious what he makes of that. And he's like, all right, well, if we're not going to do this, then this is what my life's going to look like. You know that, right? Which me personally, day to day, sometimes I'm like, they gotta go sign him. Like this makes all the sense in the world. And the next day, I'm like, I don't really like this metric here, and it's like, ooh, that's not that great. Win probability added, kind of concerning for that
Hmm.
kind of money and that kind of year. So I go back and forth myself. Maybe it's because I'm resigned to the fact, like you said, that he's not going to be coming to Detroit. But until something happens, the possibility does exist.
Yeah, and I think if he were to sign somewhere else, you're going to see even more of that in like Detroit circles, the devaluing of Alex Bregman. And look, there are some arguments for it. And I've said, just give him 7,200, just give him six, 180, whatever it is. Give the man what he wants because he makes a lot of sense for this team. Um, but this isn't a 40 homer guy anymore. This isn't a 7-win player anymore. It is probably important to keep that in perspective. I could see the Tigers, if they don't get him, spinning this as like we think we can get just as much out of Jayce Jung and Matt Vierling, and they're probably not correct if that were to be the thinking. But like, could they get 85 to 90% of that production? They probably could.
Yeah. I mean, baseball and the economy, man. There's a number out there to determine whatever you think is right. to back it up. That's how it works. Speaking of markets, we are seeing movement in the relief pitcher market finally, Cody. The Dodgers have their fair share, as they do on most baseball markets. More power to them. But this is not a source of frustration for me because I never the term relief pitcher and bidding war connected to a Scott Harris administration just doesn't connect. I
Yeah.
might as well tell me that gravity is reverse. Like
Yeah.
I don't see that happening. But the fact that the market is moving should hopefully, in theory, with 20 something days to pitchers and catchers reporting, hopefully that at least kind of moves things along that they can kind of fill in some of these roles that they do have available.
Yeah, I am still of the belief that the Tigers should add a relief pitcher. I think they need more swing and miss in their bullpen. I don't think it's a responsible strategy to just hope Alex Lang returns to form and boom, there's your answer. But I will side with the Tigers on like not handing out huge deals to relievers. Like the question looms, do the Tigers need a traditional closer? I would kind of argue no. I think they need a dominant swing and miss reliever. I don't think it matters what inning the guy pitches. I think the past 3 years can serve as proof. The Tigers bullpen has been anywhere from solid to very good, and they have not needed a full-time closer. Closers still can be greatly overpaid and overvalued, overrated. But I thought Kirby Yates would have been a great fit for the Tigers, probably would have been my top choice. He's gone. I thought Paul Sewald would have been a good fit. He's gone. Jose Leclerc, guy, higher walk rate, but a guy I thought I had huge upside. Would be very curious to see him work with Chris Fetter and Robin Lund. He's off the market. So this list of relief pitchers available is getting thin quickly. David Robertson's still out there. Kenley Jansen is still out there. There were a couple others that make sense. I think Kenley Jansen could be kind of cool, bring a little swagger, but also veteran experience. The walk rate is a little bit higher, but man, Kenley has had double-digit Ks per nine and good strikeout rates pretty much his entire career. Still an effective pitcher. I think it would be a mistake to not bring in someone to help take this bullpen to the next level or ensure it can sustain what it was doing in the second half of last year.
Well, to that note, like if we're throwing names around there, then that around that area, around that age or whatever, that makes me go back to this whole veteran leadership thing and all that stuff. And Jensen, for all of his faults, it's a guy who's seen pretty much every situation that there is in the game, right? So like that could be a valuable tool as well. So like that part intrigues me and makes me okay to overlook. Like he's not being brought in as a savior. None of these guys will be brought in as a bullpen savior. So therefore, like you're looking at some intangible stuff in some specific roles. And I think we haven't really seen this yet. But one of the iterations that would be like a test for this regime and this pitching staff and sports science staff and all that stuff is, and honestly, Cobb probably be an example of this too, is bringing in and getting like everything out of someone with some, put it kindly, seasons on the arm. You see what I'm saying? Like we've seen them kind of like make moves to like maximize young players' potential, like the Bo Briskys of the world. But I think another way that's gonna make you a stable franchise is to be able to sell to older pitchers to come here. We've seen this and like relievers, I guess I'm saying specifically because they've done this in the starting pitching market a little bit, but like get your guys north of 33 years old. It's like, come here and we'll get the most out of you and we'll make you successful. And, after that is kind of, up to you. So that, just something that's kind of kicking around my mind as well. Another thing kind of kicking around my mind, Cody, is, this past weekend, there was a fan fest for the Rangers. And by the way, these guys had a busy day because there's also like a huge card show up in Allen. So they were in Arlington in the morning. A lot of them went up to this card show in Allen for autographs and stuff. I mean, that's basically the whole Metroplex. You're basically driving Connecticut to go from these two spots. I think it would be nice for me to see that happen with the Tigers, especially. And I'm not even trying to get into like nitty gritty stuff, but I'm just trying to put things together where it's like you make the postseason. There's all this optimism with the franchise. Gleyber Torres is no, huge star, but he is a name that you brought in there that can excite some fans or whatever. This feels like not having a Tigers Fest right now feels like a little bit of a missed opportunity to really grow the attention and the excitement going into a season in which you are, from the top down, aiming to win the division.
Yeah, I've never quite understood or really been a fan of the Tigers doing away with Tiger Fest, which they had for years. The last year there was a true Tiger Fest was 2019. Things got weird in 2020, and then the Tigers tried to reorganize around like doing autograph signings in the summer or whatever. Like that's good for like kids who want autographs or whatever. But the point is to build excitement and kind of help the community get to know the team in the winter. There are a lot of teams out there that are still doing these days. I'm attending one of them for a story for another team coming up this weekend. Like, I think at the time it was like not the most cost prohibitive thing to have like heaters at Comerica Park and to line the floors, and they wanted to keep it, I believe, free and accessible to the fans. I don't know, man. You want to make some more revenue, sign some big free agents, charge 20, 30, 40, $50, whatever. I think people would pay it. And you could do it. I don't know. Let's just own the Fox Theater. There are plenty of other venues you could do this if you didn't want to have it at Comerica Park. I think the biggest obstacle to having an event like this would be getting players physically in Detroit. But guess what? Half the team was just in Detroit for this hitting camp. Would have been perfect to have that coincide with some sort of fan fest. It's probably not the biggest deal in the world. It probably doesn't impact what's going to happen on the field this year. But I just think it's be a good. I don't know if you want people to be more fired up about Gleyber Torres, have him go out there and talk to some people, and have him be a face people can get to see and know, instead of waiting until March, April. The point of these things is to build excitement, and I don't really see what the downside is.
Yeah. I mean, it cost. I'm not involved in all that kind of stuff, but I just kind of look at something like that as like, if you wanted to do it, there's a way. There's a way to absolutely do it. And Detroit's not the only place with cold weather. You know what I mean? So in January. So I just think that that's something that you could parlay last season's success into this, and there would be no downside, like you said. So hopefully it's something that comes back, especially as some of these, like the second tier of the young core, come up. Like that's going to be another way to kind of draw like people in, and make some of these kids like lifelong fans of like the Jobs of the world, the Clarks of the world. Which brings us to our next kind of topical thing. This morning, Cody, Baseball America put out their top 100 prospects list, and the Tigers very well represented. Got 5 in the top 100, and there's only, I believe, 3 teams that have more, and it's all within 2. I think 7 was the top in Seattle. So things, again, continue to look good for the organization coming off a playoff win. I know these guys weren't necessarily directly related to that, but Jackson Jobe comes in at number 3 overall. Max Clark, number 22. Kevin McGonigal, number 23. Talk about guys that are just going to be always linked really close. Somebody that I think I'm very excited to watch this year, but we just don't know much about. Last year's first-round pick, Bryce Rayner, checks in at number 60. And if he's any sort of prospect that you drafted in the B, he's going to shoot up those boards. And then Tyron Lorenzo, number 69. So the Flaherty deal represented there in the top 100. And you could argue there's some other guys that maybe would be deserving, Brasinho not on the list, that kind of thing. So you see that list there. Anything kind of stand out to you?
I'm almost surprised Bersenio's not on the list, given he won a triple crown in the AFL. I mean, there's some limitations to his profile, but I think he could be a top end back 100 player, and is not related to the Baseball America list. But I'm still like tripping over the fact Baseball Prospectus had Kevin McGonigal as its number 6 overall prospect, not Max Clark, Kevin McGonigal, and it just makes me wonder, like, could he actually be that good? Some of the batted ball metrics, the exit velos, the data suggest he has that sort of profile. And I think that's why Baseball Prospectus had him ranked that highly. And I think it was Dan Dickerson who said, if you think about it in a way, Job, Clark, some people think Clark's top 10 prospect. Some people think McGonigal's a top 10 prospect. In a way, maybe you have 3 top 10 prospects. Whether that validates the decision to draft Max Clark or not, I'm not sure, but it just makes me really looking forward to watching Kevin McGonigal this year and forming more of an opinion of what he actually is. And you mentioned Bryce Rayner, too, a guy who didn't play after his draft. I think he kind of out of sight, out of mind a little bit. I believe he had I don't remember if it was a hamstring, I think a groin injury that was part of the reason he didn't play in like the Florida Gulf Coast League or anything like that. It's going to be a little bit of a slower development for Rayner. I don't think the Tigers are at all looking to shoot him through the system. I think they view him as a prospect who will take a little longer to develop even than Max Clark, maybe just a little bit more raw at the plate. But like, we haven't seen Bryce Rayner yet. We haven't heard much since he was drafted. I'm excited to see him in spring training.
Well, longtime listeners of us know that we love the Marcelo Meyer and Jackson Jobe updates, but there's another one that's kind of developing that we're going to have to talk about. We're well aware of the Wyatt Langford conversation in regards to the Max Clark pick, and we've adjudicated that about signing and all that stuff. We've been through it. But one thing that's not getting talked about, I don't know if anyone's paying attention to the buzz of one Walker Jenkins. Like he is up there on all these lists. A lot of them, if not most or all of them, higher than Max Clark. Like people love themselves some Walker Jenkins. And if you guys don't know who that is, he was the other prep outfielder from that draft that basically you were just going to talk about both of them at the same time if you were doing any sort of draft prep that year. I never heard him linked really at all to the Tigers, if memory serves, but good for him for having a nice start to his professional career, but that's going to be another thing. It could be, hopefully, because I root for success for people, hopefully you got 3 star outfielders out of the top 10 of this draft in Jenkins, Langford, and Clark, which, by the way, if you look, the MLB Pipeline is doing, and again, sorry about the dogs, MLB Pipeline is doing these, tools lists and top, whatevers for, by position. Clark is, obviously up there in the top 10, but the tools like the arm, the glove, the speed, he's considered among, if not the best. And then the bat is the one thing that, like, while not concerning, it's just like, it's the one thing it's the one tool that's got to catch up. So that's what we're watching for this year.
It's not bad. And the question looms, is he a shortstop? Is McGonigal a shortstop? Is he a second baseman? One reason I'm excited to watch him this year to kind of begin making that judgment.
And if he hits like he like it looks like he can, I don't particularly care. Just find a find a spot. All right. Well, another one here, Cody. Just to tie up the prospect thing, Jayce Jung gets that prospect list. And he's number 6 or whatever. Like, Jayce Jung's always been a weird guy in the, like, top 100 prospect list. Like, he's, as far as first-round picks and majority consensus top 100 prospects, once he, kind of got his feet under him professionally, he's about as unheralded as they come. That's a weird thing to say. Like, even though, like, projection-wise, he made the big leagues at was obviously a reasonable clip for a college guy. He hasn't had a lot of fanfare. There's a reason. I mean, we spent all offseason basically trying to get the Tigers to sign somebody to replace him in the lineup, essentially. But I don't know. Like, I'm optimistic about him selfishly as a Big 12 guy, but they had him as the most to prove amongst the third base prospects in MLB, which, by the way, is a very top-heavy top 10. Most guys are either already made the big leagues or by 2026 are their expected arrival. So it's a very, very top-heavy list there. But he's a guy who got on base at a, I would say, mature clip in his 34 games. And if you go and you look at his 34 games compared to Colt Keith's last year, like first 34, first 50, like there's a lot to like about what Jung showed last year. And I would wager if he has, because he doesn't profile as the hitter as Colt Keith, right? But if he has a easier time adjusting this season to playing, he's not going to be an everyday good player, but somewhat everyday, it might make the administration look a little bit bad for not having Keith and Jahan, or excuse me, Keith and Jahan start out get some big league reps a couple years ago before the 2024 season. So kind of like two approaches there. I don't think people are kind of, thinking about that way, but two approaches there to get some guys some reps here. And I think Jayce, if you baseball reference, 248, 332 on base, not a ton of power. They project him to be more of a gap hitter than an over the wall hitter. I think there's a case to be made that maybe he's like the sleeper of the team. I don't have like a huge thing to say here, but if he's finally healthy, he's some version of adequate defensively, and he has a plate approach that tracks, maybe we shouldn't be spending, hours a week trying to replace him.
Yeah, I mean that's been one of my questions all off season. How do the Tigers actually feel about this guy? He was a number 12 overall pick. I think we can take for granted that he's a pretty pure hitter. Like this guy is just hit at every level. He has, I think, 377 career on base percentage in the minors. Power was down a little bit last year and wasn't really there at all in his big league stint. But he was dealing with a wrist injury, and I've heard that wrist injury actually did affect him and limit his power at the plate. Um, the defense at third, I don't think is good. I think it's a little better at second. But, is he an everyday caliber MLB player is going to be the big question. How well can he hit lefties? My least favorite thing to do is to hype up young players. In the scouting world, it's just kind of easier to project guys on the lower end. That ends up being right more often than not. And so there's some things in Young's profile that scare me. But to your point, like I like the way this guy plays the game. All he's ever really done is hit. He hasn't necessarily had these long adjustment periods, even in the way Colt Keith has. Yeah, he was still adjusting to the major leagues while posting a 360 plus on base percentage. That's where I kind of go back to like, all right, if they don't get Bregman, is it the end of the world? Is it doomsday? It's not doomsday. I think they deserve to be criticized if they don't get Alex Bregman. But could you get 85 to 90% of his production with a Veerling Young platoon or add someone else into that mix? And I tend to think that might be possible based on what Jayce Jung can do with the bat.
Yeah, just to tie a bow on that real quick, Colt Keith was batting 152 34 games into his career. And the fact that he finished as strong, like if you look at his overall numbers for the season, it gives you an idea of just how damn good he was to finish the year once he got his footing. So there's something to be said for that. So yeah, I mean, there's a curiosity element to Jung that I just, as you accept reality, I guess that might be the theme of this podcast. As you accept reality, kind of accepting like maybe this kid has something. Again, I'm not even projecting like anything high end, but just something formidable. Speaking of reality, let's go to the opposite
It's
of
not
reality.
living reality. That's more fun.
Let's have some fun here as we wrap up on a Wednesday night. So let me preface it by this. In October, after the season ended for the Tigers, and I were to tell you, so the Tigers are going to make a free agents move, and it's going to be for Gleyber Torres. And he's not going to play third base. He's going to play second base. and then you're going to move Colt Keith after 1 year from second base to first base, and then you're essentially boxing out Spencer Torkelson from being on the team. I think one of the words you would describe those series of events would be, it's kind of weird. A little bit out of the box. Not necessarily bad, just a little out of the box. So I'm trying to think of some somewhat out of the box ways to kind of bolster the lineup. And one of them is a guy who, like Alex Bregman, is beloved by the team that he came up with. And like Alex Bregman turned down a lucrative contract extension, and like Alex Bregman is a Boris client, and like Alex Bregman is currently unemployed, and that is Pete Alonso. So I ask you this, Cody. Pete Alonso, first baseman. What say you about, like, why don't you see if Pete will sign for 2 years, $50 million, 30 in the first year. He gets and it's a player option after 1. He gets a $20 million insurance policy, essentially, which would be the low end of his market as of now. And just say, hey, come in here and hit. You'll play some first base, spell Colt Keith occasionally, be mainly a DH, obviously. But you're signing a guy who should make an all-star team, hit 30 home runs, and raises the profile of your team a little bit. What about that? What do you think about that?
I think there's zero chance it would happen if we want to go back to living in reality. The Tigers moved Colt Keith to first base. I don't think he's going to third base. They moved him off of that a year ago. And Gleyber Torres, you signed him under the understanding he was a second baseman, so he's not shifting to third base. And the idea that Alonso is going to sit in the DH spot most days, or Keith sits in the DH spot most days, just isn't how the Tigers operate. So I think there is realistically zero world where Pete Alonso fits. But at least some interesting questions. Why'd you sign Gleyber Torres when Pete Alonso is still in the market? Now, I think Pete Alonso a little bit overrated, a little bit more of a name and a home run derby guy than, just look at his WAR. He's been not up to the standard of a 3-WAR player the past 2 years. The power is there and the power is real, but he's not a very good defender. He's not a very good average or on base guy. I mean, the power is legit, but otherwise, I see why the Tigers weren't in on him when he was asking for whatever he was asking for. But if his market is kind of cratering, I think maybe I'd rather have him than Gleyber Torres. So if you're looking to kind of like deconstruct all this, it does lead back to the question, like, why did the Tigers not get a first baseman? The only player they've been tangibly linked to, I think, was Carlos Santana, who ended up signing with the Guardians. There were Christian Walker whispers, but maybe they didn't want to give up a draft pick. And, like, I was never a fan of the Paul Goldschmidt idea, but there were options out there, and there's still the best of those options is still out there. And they gave Gleyber 115. I think the Gleyber thing might work out just fine, but I do think it is fair to question it when Pete Alonso is still sitting out there on the market.
So my thing is that, like, the Gleyber thing, I have no doubt would, like, work. I think it's going to work as intended.
Well, I said it would work if there was another move coming. I don't know if that.
Well, I mean, I think you signed him for what he is. I don't think there's going to be some. I don't think there's going to be some jump. I don't think he's getting a 6-year contract next season. I think he's going to be this solid right-handed hitting, infielder who you're going to scratch your head a couple times defensively and on the base pass. I think he is what he is. And I think it could work. Like, it's going to work for what you intended him to do, in my opinion. But it is a 1-year structure thing. So, again, like the whole Pete Alonso idea is like, what if you just kind of said, let's get weird for a year and see what happens as we try to, kind of figure out the best use of this team, which is still very young, very, very young, as we talked about. But how is this on for size, Cody? There is an outfielder out there that is a free agent who was an all-star last year. And I'm looking at his Baseball Savant page right now, and it kind of looks like he dominates the strike zone. His name is Jurickson Profar. Jurickson Profar has been on my radar for years, obviously living in North Texas. But I went and kind of looked at some of his like percentile rankings, which, you can take those for whatever you want. But this dude does not chase. He does not whiff. He walks a decent clip. He doesn't strike out that much. And he unlocked some power last season while not increasing his strikeout percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Like he did the thing that you would just like envision. Oh, wouldn't it be great if you could increase power but not increase your K percentage? He did that. Not much of a defender, obviously, but there is versatility in there, so you can play around with him a little bit. And I envision kind of having like almost like a real 4-man outfield. Kind of call it 3 because I don't think Parker Meadows fits into this too much, but if you wanted to round it up, you could. Where you basically have Carpenter, you have Green, and you have Profar. 2 of those guys on most days are going to be in the outfield, and the third one could be DH, right? And then against lefties, obviously Profar is a switch, so that gives you lefty percentage for the Carpenters of the world. For I know Green plays every day, but if you just didn't really like that matchup, you wouldn't have to play Green, if that makes sense. So Jurickson Profar was kind of petering out a little bit over the past couple of years, and then he found this, new stroke, if you would, and he wants, according to Jeff Passan this a couple months ago, could it be still true? I don't know, but he wants reportedly like a 3-year deal. So what if you threw him 3 for 50, 3 for 3 for anything, whatever. You get creative. 3 for 45, 3 for 50. You throw in the player option, put a mutual option in there if you want to. You can figure out a way, I think, to bring him into this lineup, and he would bolster, like, just the offensive numbers alone. He bolsters the lineup more than Torres does. Then I would feel more comfortable with him that like 3 for 50. I'll even go 3 for 60 than what Santander got. I'm sorry I mispronounced it, but you know what I'm saying. Like, I would feel more comfortable with that than some of these contracts that are being dished out for a guy who offers a lot of things that you value as an organization is there for you. So I think the more I constructed like this lineup and what it could do, I think the Profar thing makes a lot of sense.
I think you lay out a pretty compelling case. Profar hasn't been linked to the Tigers that we know of this offseason, and really he's never been linked to the Tigers despite being a free agent in recent years when the Tigers were not that good. And there have been previous years where that surprised me. I think the question now is, how much do you believe in what he did last year? It was easily the best year of his career. He was a 4.3 wins above replacement player. And the quality of his contact was just radically better at age 31. He went from having 86.5 average exit velocity in the bottom 9 percentile of the league to 91.1 mile per hour average exit velocity. His barrel rate shot up. His hard hit rate went from 31% to 44%. Like, almost such a distinct jump that you just don't really see at age 31, like almost to the point where I'm like, maybe that's not a fluke. Like, his adjustments must have really made a real difference to the point maybe he could repeat it. Switch hitter, career splits are unimpressive from both sides, but last year he really raked against lefties. So it's kind of like, which Jurickson Profar are we talking about? 2023 Profar or 2024 Profar? I think given the inherent risk in that question, I would not touch this dude on a 3-year deal. But if you get him for 1 year, and in this Tigers universe where they miss out on Bregman and you're just trying to somehow strengthen this roster, I think there's a pretty interesting case for one Jurickson Profar.
Yeah. I mean, part of me is just like fantasizing about a team that's going to make me excited to watch when they're at the plate and frustrated to watch when they're in the field.
Might be the MO of these Tigers, with the exception of Parker Meadows and Riley Green.
Right. But again, like there are opportunities out there, I think, and again, not to say that they would do it or like this would be perfect, but there are opportunities out there for them to pivot if they wish. Because, by the way, Profar is linked to the Blue Jays, just like everybody else is. So, like, you get, because some of it is like, can you actually find a role for this guy in the team? And I think there is an actual real Profar role that you could
so versatile. It makes a ton of sense in
and
that regard.
and you might be able to shed another guy and have more room for like a J Hen if you bring in a Profar. You see what I'm saying? Like there's that element to it there, because if I can find a way to not have to carry, I'm not going to try to cut somebody on this podcast, but not have to carry one of my other utility guys. And then also that allows me to have J Hen full time and let him develop and let him be against my lefties first baseman, right? Like that intrigues me a lot. That intrigues me a lot, and I think it makes them more formidable to win the division.
The one thing, he would be occupying a pretty duplicate role as one Wenzel Perez that might be a utility guy who, in this theoretical universe, would lose out on a spot. And that makes the question interesting too. Would you rather pay for the risk factor of Jurickson Profar, hoping you get the upside, or give at bats to a young guy who was pretty good last year? It might be tough to have them both on the roster at the same time. And if the Tigers were to argue in favor of Wenzel Perez, I would understand it.
Yeah, I mean, the Perez element is investment in the young player and, earmarking at bats for the young players and all that stuff. And you could argue maybe it's a little bit changed from, usual character. But at the same time, it's a low long-term risk move here potentially. And, somebody's going to get hurt. Wenzel would have plenty of opportunities to impact the team in the big league. So, like, and also, as much as I like him, I don't think he should prevent you from making some move that could help your major league team like get to the playoffs again in a real way. So so that's kind of my mindset on that. So I mean, tell us what you think at Cody Stavenhagen, at Kieran_Steckley, at Tiger Territory _ on YouTube. Thank you again to everybody who have subscribed. If you're not subscribed to YouTube, please do so we can continue to grow the show. Tell us what you think. Are these outside the box ideas a little bit too outside the box? Or if you have some yourself, like send them to us, so we can assess them, because it beats the hell out of talking about nothing happening with Alex Bregman. But we appreciate everybody staying with us through the inaction. Like I said, follow us on YouTube, subscribe, Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. And thank you guys again for making us part of your day. For Cody Stavenhagen, I'm Kieran Steckley. Everybody have a great day.